think when you believe in yourself, I think it helps you meet challenges and make mistakes too, and failing becomes a lot easier if you believe in yourself. It helps you keep trying.
Freedom is not free. Discover what it takes. It's time to tap and move forward.
Hello and welcome to Tap and Move Forward. I'm your host, Lynn Shelley. I don't know a better way to honor 9/11 than to release this episode with retired Brigadier General Christine Burckle. She started her career as a navigator, flying over 3,000 hours, later moving up through the ranks and becoming the first female general in the Utah Guard. I have been lucky to serve under her command, and I am honored she agreed to this interview, sharing her insight and experiences that developed her career and character along the way. If you Google her, you can find all sorts of news coverage from her taking command as Assistant Adjutant General to her recent retirement. Without further delay, here is the interview with General Burckle. Why did you join the military and how old were you?
I joined the military in order to pay for college. So I actually had an ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps scholarship, 4-year scholarship to college. And at the end of that, when I graduated, I got commissioned in the Air Force, and I was 22 years old. And as soon as I got commissioned, then I got my orders to go to my training. So went off to California to become a navigator. And I actually not only joined the military actually to pay for college, but I always wanted to fly. So that's kind of part of the story too.
You always wanted to fly?
I always wanted to fly and always really wanted to be a pilot. But when I graduated and took my physical, my eyesight wasn't what was required. So they said, well, if you still want to fly, we'll send you to be a navigator. And I did not have any idea what that entailed, but I thought if you get to fly, I want to do it. So.
And navigators, are they still around or they're gone altogether?
So it's funny that you say that. I was actually just in the Middle East and had the opportunity to meet the last graduate of the KC-135 air refueling program navigator, and she's actually the last navigator that will fly on the KC-135. She's in a special operations KC-135 mission. But yeah, they actually did away with navigators on our aircraft quite a few years ago. But there are still some out there on other aircraft.
Oh, okay. And just for people who don't know, can you explain a little bit about what kind of duties a navigator has?
So the pilot flies the plane and the navigator tells them where to go. And for the air refueling mission, it's more than just where to go. Actually, it's about talking to the receiver aircraft. So air refueling, mid-air refueling, it gives other aircraft, especially fighters, extends their time that they can fly. So we give them gas in the air, and one of the jobs of the navigator on the refueling plane is to actually conduct what's called a rendezvous. So it's almost like a mid-air, how we get together and join up. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but back in the day, that was probably the funnest part of my job, was getting to do that refueling part of the mission.
Where is the how do I want to ask this question?
Why aren't there navigators anymore?
Why are there no longer navigators?
Well, I guess GPS technology finally caught up with us, and believe it or not, when I actually first became a navigator, we did celestial navigation, which meant we actually used a sextant and determined our position, especially when we were flying over water, which could be kind of scary. We determined our position through either using the stars or using the sun to help navigate. So it's a lost art.
Yeah.
But then when GPS kind of came along and was perfected and they put them on our planes, I guess they decided that they were a little more accurate than shooting the sun and shooting the moon and determining position from that. But It was a lot of fun. It was a challenge. It was a great mission, and I'm so lucky and thankful that I did get to do it as long as I did. So I was officially a person replaced by a computer.
You're one of those people.
I'm one of those people. But it's funny because, and that was a really hard thing for me. I'd flown for 17 years, and I didn't want to believe that would happen. As a matter of fact, my Navigator equipment and bag is still in the garage, packed the same way it was the last mission I flew. Because I never really felt like it would be the last mission I'd fly. But, it led me to something totally different in my career. And that's something I will say is sometimes when one door closes and a window opens, you don't realize that might be your true passion. So I went into personnel.
Yeah, personnel, really?
Yeah, that was my next assignment. Like when they got rid of the navigators off our plane, they basically assigned us all different duties, and we had to train in a different
you were assigned
career field
to
personnel. Yep.
How did you feel about that assignment?
I hated it. I think it was interesting because I knew what assignments were available, and I once again had put down, like, my first choice was like public affairs. And I got called into the Wing Commander's office here at the Utah Air Guard and told by Larry Johnson that I was going to be the new personnel flight commander. And it's funny, I think I burst into tears at that point, and I was like, what? But it turned out to be probably one of the most rewarding and best assignments I ever had. But it was hard at first. And I am thankful to this day that I had a great chief, because shortly after I became the personnel flight commander, but I was still wearing my flight suit to work, and I was still going over to operations during my lunch hours to hang out with the flight crews and stuff. And she pulled me aside and just said, you need to stop. You need to wear the same uniform we wear, ABUs, and you need to embrace this new position or you're not going to be successful. And I'm sure that was hard for her, but I'm thankful to her every day that she did that, because I think once I embraced it, I started to really enjoy it, and I loved it. So
I love hearing stories like this, and I've heard quite a few of them, is just because it's part of the dynamic of the military, where people get thrown into a new duty or responsibility that they're not happy about, but it turns out to have a very rewarding aspect.
And I think that's an important thing when you're starting your career to keep in mind is it's great to have goals, and it's great to set your sights on what you want to do. But sometimes the military needs you to do something different. And when you can accept that challenge for what it is, and I have to admit, I wasn't mature and I didn't do a good job of that. But I think you'd be surprised at what you can learn and how you can grow as a person. And so don't ever think that there's any such thing as a bad assignment. There's no bad duty. So.
And somewhere in there was another transition, because you started out active duty, and so somewhere you transitioned into the Guard.
I did. So after I served that commitment that I owed for my college being paid for, I actually was at Mountain Home Air Force Base and had a decision to make of whether I wanted to stay in or whether I wanted to pursue something different. And at that point in time, I'd had 3 bases under my belt, and I'd only been in 7, almost 8 years. And I had always wanted to own my own business. So I'd saved a lot of money and made the decision after my commitment was up to come down here to Salt Lake and join the National Guard as a traditional guardsman, and I opened an espresso bar. So so I was a small business owner. Actually, it was at Fashion Place Mall, and opened it in 1997. It was a kiosk and a lot of work, but it was also very rewarding and a super cool experience. So,
how long did you have the business?
5 years, and I probably would have had it longer, except 9/11 happened. So my brother actually came out here from North Carolina, and he had majored in marketing in college, and I said, hey, do you want to come out and help me open a small business? And he never left. So we owned it together, and after the Kosovo conflict in '99, when I had to deploy for that and several other deployments, when 9/11 happened and deployment started to kick off, we made the decision that, I couldn't do both. I couldn't be a small business owner, and he couldn't run it alone, so we sold it.
So after 9/11, you decided to go back to full-time military?
Well, I was a full-time technician, a military technician here in the Utah National Guard. So
you were full-time at the time that you had the business as well?
Yeah, I was. Actually, I was full-time at the time I had the business. Actually, I started out in '97. I started out with a part-time, like a job share technician job, which was fantastic because I could own my small business and also work some hours at the guard base flying. But then I was offered an opportunity to go full-time, and that was right about the time of 9/11. And so I just made the commitment to be a full-time guardsman and sold my small business.
What was it like being in the military when September 11th happened?
It was very sobering, especially to be in the Guard. I think there had been conflicts. Desert Shield and Desert Storm and Kosovo and other conflicts that I had flown in and participated in. But I think when 9/11 hit, I think it hit all of us, of what we do, the defense of our nation, the defense of our country. And it was personal. It was very personal. And so I was prepared to do whatever it took to, deploy and do whatever needed to be done. And unfortunately, it was spring of 2002 when our unit got activated for 9/11, and I was packing my bags and I wasn't feeling well. I just sold the business and ended up finding out I was pregnant with my daughter. So I ended up not deploying, but I was also married to another guardsman, and he did go. And so it was interesting that I actually I felt like an understanding of what it felt like to be a spouse left behind during what was kind of a scary time. The deployment piece, it was kind of, we were unsure of how long it would be for, and I was pregnant, and my spouse deployed, and I was left here behind. And so now, later in my career, I think it really affected me of how I look at what we owe our families and what we need to do to help our families, support our families supporting us. So
was there another time that you did deploy post 9/11? Or
I was activated in place here because we also had Homeland Defense. So actually, I didn't deploy overseas. I think I might have one more time after 9/11, maybe like 2004, 2005. But then when they took the Navigators out of the aircraft, and when I went to personnel, there wasn't really an opportunity to deploy. But I was activated in place doing Homeland Defense, planning the missions that were still going on for at least a couple of years after 9/11 of the air support that were being flown over major cities.
So on both sides, whether you were deployed or whether your husband was deployed and you dealt with having an emptiness in your family because of deployment, how did you deal with those type of stressors?
I think at the time we didn't have as robust family support program, and so I really just turned to my friends. I'm not native out here to Utah, so I didn't have any family except my brother, who was a big support to me. But I do think the whole wingman concept. And I looked to my friends. I mean, I'll never forget one of the other navigators. It was the time of year and we were living in a rental house and the swamp cooler broke down, and there he was up on the roof fixing it for me and helping me. And I just think that's one thing I'm proud of, is that with the deployments that have happened since 9/11, and the Guard has become so operational and we're never going back, I think the family support programs becoming more robust is a huge advancement and a great benefit.
Right.
So
still, with all of those supports, the supports are there because it's stressful to lose a family member.
And and interestingly, back then, we didn't have cell phones or international calling, and you did have email, but you had to be very careful, operation security, that you couldn't really email a whole lot. But I don't know if it's a benefit or not these days of how connected you can stay when you're deployed. Like I said, I was overseas visiting some of our folks, and I think it's fantastic that they can Skype with their kids and see their families and stuff, but I also feel like it presents an additional maybe level of stress because you actually, when you deploy, you really need to focus on the mission. And when you can so easily, see what's going on at home, I know that it can also create some worries and stuff like that. But I am thankful for it. I wish we'd have had it back when I was first deploying, because that probably, the lack of communication was the hardest part. That was the biggest stress. So.
Was getting into the military exactly what you expected, or were there things that really surprised you?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me, I didn't have any family in the military, and so I guess I didn't really understand the military, traditions, etc. But the camaraderie, and I joined to pay for college, and I wanted to fly, but I stayed for 31 years because of the amazing people I met. And I think what surprised me was, I thought I was close to my, sorority sisters in college, or, you have your close friends you grew up with. But when you serve in the military with people, it creates a bond that's so deep and so different than, I think, almost any other friendship or relationship. So I would say that was probably, to me, the biggest thing I'm grateful for, and maybe a little bit too of a surprise. You
didn't expect or anticipate that you would develop such deep bonds.
Yeah, maybe I didn't understand that. And I think it's, to me, one of the best things about being in the military is when you're on a team and you trust that team, and you've developed a bond with people that you're willing to go to war. And it becomes, pretty sobering when you do deploy and you go to war. You're never going to have a relationship like that again, really. So as I retire, I'm sad, because I know when I take the uniform off, and I'm not on that team anymore, but I'll still have a relationship with the people I served with. But while you're serving and you develop those bonds with people, it's amazing.
I know what you mean. If you could give any advice to a newly enlisting member, what would it be?
I think I spent a lot of time young in my career saying they should do this and they should do that. And when you think about leadership, you think that they can fix everything. And you're like, I wonder why they. And I think what you don't really realize is you're the they. And you're always going to be the they. And it's that taking the responsibility, not only to prepare yourself for the next step in your career, but also taking the responsibility to step up. And if you see a problem, don't assume someone else, should be responsible to fix it. You're a part of the team. It doesn't matter what your rank is. I mean, every team I've ever been on, doesn't matter what rank you are, your job is just as important, whether you're the person that's making the flight lunch. Because if I don't have my flight lunch, then I can't focus on my mission. And, or the person that's having to put that personnel transaction in the computer, if you don't do it, then that person won't get paid. And if the person doesn't get paid, then, whether it's personnel or finance, etc. And so every team member is just as important as the next. So whether you're the general or you're the airman, you're you're that person on the team. And so I think another piece of advice is, I see a lot on surveys when we ask airmen, what do they want more of and what do they need? And they want feedback. And so I would say that number one, if you're not getting feedback, ask for feedback. I think, and it doesn't have to be in a formal setting with a form sitting in front of you. It can be any form of sit down with your supervisor, or sit down even with a peer and do informal feedback, because I think feedback is the only way we get better. And if you're not able to, and I think it also is important for people to learn how to take feedback and how to give feedback. And don't wait until you're in trouble or you don't know what to do because you think you're not doing something right. There's no right or wrong time to give or get feedback. It should be a continuous process.
I think it's a really good point, everything that you've said. I think just from what I've seen from new recruits coming in, and the fact that there's a good fair amount that are very close to their high school graduation, a year or two maybe. Sometimes they're in even before their graduation has happened. And the way that high school is set up, everything is very clear cut. Like, this is what you do, this is your homework, this is when you have it in.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have the same type of responsibility that you do in the military to make sure that you and everything that you have is squared away. Like, it's almost like there's hidden assignments.
Well, and I think that's the thing too, is I think of asking, always having a mentor. And I think, we try to implement these like formal mentoring programs, etc. But some of the people you learn the most from are those informal leaders and the informal mentors, or you never know when you're going to have that moment where somebody says something to you that clicks, or you can, you're sitting in a break room somewhere, take a minute to talk to that person and find out, about what's happened to them in their career and advice they would give. It's funny. I feel like we need to just be open to that all the time. And I think so many times we expect it to come in a formal package and we unwrap it and, there's your feedback. And it's like, no, you have to be looking for it, and you have to be creating opportunities where you can get it and learn from it. But give it too, just like that chief did to me. She saw me going down a wrong path, and maybe she was a little bit forward with me about it, but at the same point, I think she really saved my bacon at that point of saying, hey, if you want to be successful at this, pay attention and focus. Wear the same uniform your troops are wearing. Eat lunch with them, so.
It's another really good, important point that goes in alignment with that, because it can be really difficult for those younger airmen, not just because they're younger, but because they're new to the military. There's a lot of stigma about following structure, that it can be very intimidating to voice your thoughts or your opinions.
And I think when I have seen 3- and 4-star generals come to visit our base or visit the troops, you know who they want to talk to? They want to talk to the airmen. They know what I do. They know what the generals do. They want to talk and hear from the young airmen. And so I think that's a sign, you know, that you have so much more, not power, but responsibility, I'd say, to be prepared, because we count on you. We need to hear from you. So
I'm curious, did you always have your eye set on general?
no.
When did that change for you?
You know, I think I didn't even think I would be a colonel, to be honest. But I think as your career progresses and you do your job and you prepare yourself for the next step, and then when you're asked to do something and you're asked to step up and do something, you do it. And so, like I said, I mean, I honestly didn't ever think I would be a colonel, let alone a general. But I think when you're asked to step forward and do something, you do it. And then you also have to have the confidence that they wouldn't ask you to do it if they didn't think you could. So it's just like every time that we promote someone, you know, obviously your past performance came into the decision that we make to promote you, but we're really promoting you because of what you're going to do in the future, not resting on your laurels of what you've done in the past. So I think what you really need to do is just be ready to step forward if asked. And you know, I mean, I guess I have to say it's great to set goals, and I mean, I don't know why I didn't have a goal of being a general, but I think as I got more and more senior in my career and I looked around and I realized, I'm like, you know, we're all part of the team, and me getting to be the general officer didn't mean that I wasn't still part of that same team, and I just had a different responsibility. You know, I just had a different level of responsibility and something additional that, you know, I needed to take on. So
it sounds like maybe the first time that they came to you with it, there was maybe a little bit of an intimidation with the status or the role.
You know, I have to say, yes, that, you know, as soon as it's difficult. It is hard. It's hard to step into a new role, but you have to remember that, like I said, they wouldn't have asked you to do it if they didn't think you could, and then you have to prove that to yourself too. But also continue to be open to feedback. You know, some of the best advice I've ever seen in writing was, don't worry, everybody's making it up as they go. You know, yes. I mean, there really is no one single set of, you know, do this, and this to be a successful leader. I mean, you have to be yourself. People can see through in a minute if you're trying to be someone or something that you're not. So you can only rely on who you are and what you know to help inform you for decisions you need to make or things you need to do. But also look around. If somebody else did it and did a good job, you know, there's no shame in taking a little play out of their playbook. But like I said, I do feel like for the most part, being in the position I've been in has been about digging deep and saying, what would I have wanted the person in my job to do and be like if I weren't in this job, you know?
Which brings up another question. Within leadership, what for you are important aspects of good leadership?
I think transparency is a huge thing. I think that people, and also communication, good communication. I think that people will support you even if you have to do something that's really hard and unpopular. If, number one, you're as transparent as you possibly can be about the why. Yes. You know, and not everybody gets to know the why of every single decision that you make, but if it's going to affect them, I think you owe people that transparency and honesty as best you can to give them the why. And then people pretty much tend to go, got it. But also, you know, I think if you're a person who can be trusted, like, they need to be able to trust you. And I think part of that is just getting out and, I don't know, getting to know and meeting people, having a personal connection with people, and not sitting in your ivory tower. You got to get out and be among people, especially if you're a leader. Get out of your office and be with your people. And I know there's a lot of things, I have to be honest, there were a lot of things that required me to have to be in my office, but I think some of the most valuable experiences and best opportunities I had were getting to come over and visit our newest recruits and reward them and say thanks for what they do, and maybe say any questions, and I got thrown some pretty good questions out there once in a while.
If you were going back to yourself before you joined the military, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh boy. You and I talked a little bit about self-confidence and believing in yourself. And I think there were a lot of times that self-doubt probably took over more than it should have. And I'm not saying be arrogant or cocky, but I think when you believe in yourself, I think it helps you meet challenges and make mistakes too, and failing becomes a lot easier if you believe in yourself. It helps you keep trying. So
yeah, I'd absolutely agree. And even just being willing to put yourself out there. What do you consider your greatest military accomplishment or your most meaningful military experience?
Oh boy. Gosh, I think it's really hard to talk about a single accomplishment, but I think the thing I'm proudest of is the base as it is today. Like, I know that I can retire and that there are people on that base that I have watched grow up in their careers and are ready to step right up and keep it going and keep the proud traditions going, but also the mission going. And when I go to bed at night, I feel comfortable and safe that the folks at the Utah National Guard are ready to do whatever's asked of them. And not that I had anything to do with that, but just that I feel like being on that team and having the opportunity to lead that team for the period of time that I did is something I am so proud of. So I feel so grateful.
Are there any people that have been majorly influential to you during your career?
Wow. So many, and some in small ways and some in large ways. I would say, marrying another service member, I think, and then also just, knowing what my family has had to do to allow me to serve, I think is probably the greatest influence on me being able to be successful, was knowing that I had the support of my family. My daughter understood when I couldn't always be there, and my husband has always, supported me and completely 100% believed in me. So.
Did you meet your husband in the service?
Of course I did. It's funny. It's not something I recommend because it was hard to be dual military. As a matter of fact, we were on our honeymoon in France when the unit got recalled to go deploy for the Kosovo conflict. And so we actually interrupted our honeymoon and flew all the way home and packed our bags and flew all the way over to Crete, to Suda Bay, to join the unit.
Wow.
And then got put on opposite schedules. And so I like to tell people I spent my honeymoon with the Utah Air National Guard on the lovely island of Crete. I don't know where I was going with that.
Just one of the stories of
It's just one of the many
the
stories.
difficulties of
Yeah,
being...
dual military families. It is really tough. It's very hard.
And yet, on another level, there's a beautiful aspect to it in that you understand each other and where you're coming from that way.
And I also feel like that is a huge thing is, when your spouse was military or is military, that they do truly understand, you're not on vacation.
Right.
When you go to, a place that might have a beach, you might not see that beach. So, or you might get one picture on the beach and everybody thinks that that's how you spent your whole time there.
Right.
It's like, no, that was the one day off.
Yeah. What behaviors did you learn in the military that are most impactful to you in your life?
Oh boy. One thing I would say is, the whole excellence in all you do, to have pride in what you do, pride of ownership, pride of work, and I think, when I owned a small business and I tried to instill that in my employees, where don't take shortcuts. Have pride in what you do, have pride in your appearance. When you wear the uniform, and you're representing the United States, I think that it's that personal pride that you have when you wear that uniform that has carried over to my personal life too.
That's a great one. And speaking of that, how do you respond when people tell you thank you for your service?
So, if it's in the grocery store, I always say thank you for your support. And sometimes if it's a funny situation, I say thanks for paying your taxes. But I also like to take a moment, to thank them and then ask them, oh, were you in the service? Or like to engage just for a minute. Because they took that moment to recognize you, and I like to try to turn around and say, oh, thank you. Did you serve, or do you have a family member? And I think it's neat and great, to be able to be thanked for our service, but also to turn around, because most of the time there is a military connection there, and they're like, yeah, my dad or my mom, and you say, well, thank them for their service.
If you could infuse the new enlistees of the military with a superpower or a skill set that would help them in their careers and the future of the military, what would it be?
Communication. And I'm going to tell you this, that my biggest fear for this next generation is that social media and the part that it plays in who we are can get too great a hold of you. Be careful what you do on social media. So the superpower is, communicate how you want to be seen, and be careful about letting your guard down on things like social media. I've seen far too many people who I know are really good airmen do stupid things on social media because I think that they feel like that is a safeguard, like that's, that you can say things on the, whatever it is that you're on. But just, I think communication, being aware of how communication will affect how people perceive you and your future. So
yes, there's been a number of instances where somebody puts something up on social media thinking it's funny or a joke, and it comes back to not be so funny or not so much a joke and affect their career.
Yeah, and I think that I didn't have that as part of something I had to really think about early in my career. I mean, we didn't have cell phones, so but now when I think about it, like that superpower, I guess I would say, is to just be really vigilant that you know, I think there's a time to joke around and there's a time to have fun, but, you know, when I saw a posting that was a funeral honors team and they put something about, you know, whatever that it was that they said, I'm certain at the time that they didn't think about the consequences, and then that goes viral, and then it was so inappropriate and so offensive. Just some recent things happen, you know, college students posing for pictures and that they don't think will ever go anywhere. It's their small group of friends on the internet. Be very careful. Be very careful on social media, and just be very aware of, you know, anybody can take any cell phone picture of you at any point in time, and it can be misconstrued and misperceived. So just look out for each other and be careful.
I have to ask, did you find that there were unique challenges for you being a woman in the military?
At first, when I joined, and I mean, I did understand, you know, the women, well, I didn't understand it. I accepted that women couldn't fly fighters. I don't know why, but I accepted it. But then when there were other barriers to different things that I was like, why? I mean, I could do that. I know I could do that. I could meet those standards. I think that was really hard for me. But now, you know, if you can meet the standard, you can do the job in any branch. I think that's a huge leap ahead, but with that comes responsibility as well. So no, besides hating whoever designed our uniform forever and ever, because they never designed anything to really fit women. I just got a funny survey of, if you ever wore the maternity uniform, please tell us, you know, what you thought about it. And I'm like, well, it's been a long time ago, but yes, I still have very, very distinct feelings about how it felt to feel like a blueberry in those maternity pants. So I think just the challenges that I faced that seemingly don't exist brought new challenges for you, this new generation of, okay, now that you can, there's no bar to you in any career field. Now it's about making sure that you're prepared for that. You know, you got to meet the standards like everybody else.
Yes.
So
I thought that the standard had changed in the 70s to open up women to be able to be in fighters.
They could fly planes, but no, they could not fly fighters until, and I think Colonel Sabrick was one of the first women, and I believe it was the early 90s. And it's funny you say that, because when they did open up the fighter cockpits to women, I was at Mountain Home Air Force Base, and I was called into the wing commander's office. I was still young enough that he said, do you want to go be a Strike Eagle weapons system officer, or do you want to go to pilot training and try to get a fighter? And because at the time, too, the eyesight standards had changed. And to be honest, at that stage of my career, I was so happy with what I was doing, but I also knew that I was preparing to come into the civilian world and start my own business, and I was already very excited about that. But you know, I guess I wasn't interested at that point because I had already been in my mission and loving it. But yeah, I think it was the early 90s. I'll have to
Okay.
look
Yeah,
into
I'll
that.
have to
with you.
double check, because obviously my timeline, or what I thought was the timeline, is off.
Yeah, I think in the 70s was when they were able to go to the service academies and to fly, but not fighters or combat aircraft.
Okay.
So yeah, there are women pilots that go back that far, but they could only fly like transport and refueling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the WASPs were really early.
Oh yeah, and they
And
were
then it was, like,
trainers,
shut
and they
down.
did delivering of aircraft, and they
Right.
trained people. Yeah.
But then they shut down women being pilots for a number of years, and then that must have been what it was in the 70s, that it reopened, but not to fighters.
Not to
Fighters
combat.
can't- or
Women
to
couldn't serve in
to
combat.
fighter.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
So.
Are there any stories that you like to tell from your career?
You know, at this point, it's been so fun to reminisce, and I think my stories, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I could pick any one story except to say that it's been a blast. And I've loved not every minute, but I've loved pretty much every moment of my career. So thanks for asking. Maybe after I retire, I'll be ready to tell a few of those stories. Yeah.
Write a book of all your stories.
I don't know. I've thought about it because there were some fun ones. Yeah.
Well, General Burckle, it has been an absolute honor to have you on the show, and I really appreciate getting to know a little bit more about your early career and how you've navigated your career overall.
Thank you. And I want to tell you thank you for doing this, and for what you're doing for the younger airmen, because they have every reason to be excited about the future, and I think it's great to just see everything you guys are doing. So this is the good part of social media. So.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point for me, is to find ways to inspire them and to help them understand, because it can be really easy when you see a general to think that they were just always a general.
Yeah, no,
you
there
don't
were
realize all of the journey and the navigation that it takes to get there.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found a new mindset to help you excel. To share what you learned, please visit www.tamfpodcast.com/navigator.